Welcome to the Product Design Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Coelen, founder of UX Cabin, where we create world-class web and mobile apps. I'm excited to bring you a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of some of the most interesting and talented people in product design. We'll get strategic advice on how they got to where they are today and things they wish they would have known earlier in their career. All right, today we have a really exciting podcast for you because this is our first team member spotlight. And today we have with us Predrag Beočanin, and I can't say his name very well, so we usually call him Fisher on the team. Fisher, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Predrag Beočanin, which was very close to what you said. I love it. But yeah, everybody does call me Fisher because my name's hard to pronounce and Fisher isn't. And I'm 32 and I come from Novi Sad, Serbia, which is a little place in in Central Europe.
Very nice. And tell us what you do at UX Cabin.
So I'm a front-end developer that dabbles with whatever technical stuff we need as well. I have no idea what the official term would be, but yeah, if we do need like back-end work, I can do it. If we do need DevOps, I can do it. It's what we need is like rudimentary. So obviously I can handle it, but I guess my main thing is a front-end developer.
Johnny on the spot, right?
Yes.
Whatever's needed, you'll do it.
I do work. I do stuff.
You do a lot of work most days.
Yeah, that's the best description I have. Like I type in some code and stuff happens.
I feel like we've had so much fun over the years. I'm really excited to dive in and rehash some things and pick your brain on all types of things. So why don't you just kick us off with kind of how we got started back in the day?
Yeah, so back in the day, I was doing like my utmost to avoid doing code. Like I was trying to do everything except write code for a living because like, based off of all the other experience, it seemed like a little dry where it's like, you go into work, you do like 8 hours of whatever, and then you go home. Like there's no creativity, no like, fun stuff. So actually we met because of a design project. We were working together on a design project and I was doing design and we were having a blast and it was fun. And then it was like, okay, so what do you have planned next? And that was at a point where I was not really sick of freelance, but it was like a little annoying to be like broke every third month or, every 6 months, however. So yeah, I was looking for something stable, but not like, where I have to like work 16 hours or, have working hours or have to wake up or, the typical stuff. So that's where you came in with a nice offer. Yeah.
Like Fisher said, I kind of found him when I was looking for someone for a design project, and he did excellent at design, but he slowly creeps his way into development. But I think there's one thing that I learned in working with a lot of different freelancers online is it's really easy to put a job out there and have 100 applicants saying, I'm really good at UI design, or I'm really good at this, and you don't really have any way to evaluate them other than give them the project. So after a number of failed attempts to bring on freelancers, I kind of changed the way that I post jobs online, and that's what led me to Fisher. And I remember I didn't ask like, are you an expert at Sketch or UX design or any of those things. I basically just said like, explain to me how you create symbols in Sketch. I just asked very like specific things that only an expert would know. And if someone came in and they were just like, I'm very good at this, believe me, kind of threw their application out the window. And I was also sometimes put a keyword in there, like, if you've read this far, put banana in the subject, and that would just tell me if someone like read it correctly. So for like the first little bit that we worked together, you were just solely design. What in your career path made you want to move more towards front end?
I've primarily done code since I was like this small, basically. It's something I did, but like it's one of those things where it's like when you turn it into a job, it may stop being fun, you know, and that's kind of a huge deal breaker for me, because I don't like, it's very hard to like snap at someone and be like, hey, solve this complicated thing, and then do that 8 hours a day. That's like, it's really hard to do that, and like there's not a lot of people that can do that. Like some of my best solutions to the biggest problems we've had with code came from riding a bike or, you know, taking a nap, and then I wake up and I'm like, I got this one, I know what to do. So our approach to work, the way we approach design and, you know, projects in general, and, you know, communication and all this fun stuff, that all that encompassed was awesome. And then I was like, okay, but if I can also code in this environment, that's great. And then one thing you did, which is like, trust me, very rare, is you respected my opinion as an expert when it comes to code. So you wouldn't like try to push me like 6 different times, you doing the same thing, like, oh, but what if we maybe do this? So but then what if you take a day off here, and then, like, you know, just if I tell you like I need a day, you're like, okay, you have a day. Or you know, if I'm like, this is very hard, you're like, can we do it easier? Like, what can we change? Your approach to executing stuff is what was like, oh, maybe coding is fun here, and then I do like coding, so let's do that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, I guess.
I remember you got started in code a little bit in UX Cabin, and I just kind of like found out that you did PHP, even though you didn't really want to be doing PHP. I was like, ooh, I can use you on this crappy WordPress project that I don't want to do anymore. It's kind of like for pinch hitting. And then I remember one time we had a lull in client work, like a month and a half. I was just working on a project. We had an idea to build LayoutLab, and you had never really done React before. Just maybe played around with a little bit, knew some of the concepts. You basically took some time to build that, and for you to learn React. How do you look back on that time frame and that scenario?
So I went blind, but I think it was the best time investment we could have done, because it allowed me to dive like super deep into React, because what LayoutLab is a site that builds sites and then also lets you export them to clean code, which in and of itself is like a challenge. Then we wanted to make it like look pretty and work nice and be fast and do all this fun stuff. And then here I am, like, I've been doing a lot of reading about React. I've been playing around with it, but I've never created like an enterprise solution in React. So like, I don't know how to deploy this thing. Like, I'm done building it, I don't know what to do with the files. Like, where does this go? Like, but so yeah, it posed like a huge number of challenges, which allowed me to like get super familiar with React, which then in turn let us, you know, take on React client work and, you know, build big stuff, because like now we know how, now we know what it is.
Looking back, it's probably one of the like best investments we've made as a company, in my opinion, just because it's like, you know, when you get to that point, you can do one of two things. You can say like, we don't have any work, go hang out for a month and a half until we do have work potentially. And by that time, maybe you have found a new gig, or, you know, something happens or whatever. But I think it was great that we, number one, pursued something that was like fun for us to build and work on together. That was kind of like a fun hobby project where we were the clients, and we, you know, weren't taking instruction from other people. We were just kind of trying to figure out how to build a software product on our own and own the product, own the requirements, own all of that. So that was like really fun. And then the other aspect is just like basically learning that skill set where we can go and take that to clients. You've got a ton of work on your plate now, thanks to learning React through LayoutLab a few years ago.
Yeah, for sure. We've built some like huge projects since, including that WordPress that you mentioned, which we rebuilt using, you know, React and PHP. Which, like, yeah, I'm not like the biggest fan of PHP, but like it works and it's fast and it does what I want it to do. So it's very easy for us to just jump in and use. Just the fact that instead of being like, yo, you know, go sleep for a little, that we went like, yeah, let's build something together, you know. And we went on like a lot of calls, and we were hacking stuff together, and we were spending like days and nights trying to figure out like, okay, we want to drag and drop, but how do we do that? Like, can we do that? Should we do that? You know. So it was a lot of fun.
Looking back at your career, how you got started, you said you were coding since you were this big. how did you even get interested in code in the first place, or interested in creative services? What was your learning path?
Um, well, my mom was doing some work from home, aside from her normal job. So she would come home and work for a few hours. So that required her to have a computer, which meant that I had access to a computer, which was awesome. And then I was like, this thing looks powerful. Like, what can it do? Like, what is every? And then
And what year was this?
this was about it was 1996 when I got my first computer. So
Really?
yeah, so I was 7 years old. It was old. It was old. It would not turn on if it wasn't 21 degrees Celsius in the room. It would just refuse to turn on. I don't know if this was a thing or what it was, but yeah, your phone has like, I don't know, 10 times the computing power of that one. It was like the Windows 3.11 or whatever it was. But it was fun for me because like I could click stuff and stuff would happen. I could make it do stuff, and I was like, that's interesting. Like, what else can I do with it? So yeah, I mean that's kind of how I got started.
Were you one of the only kids that had a computer of
Uh
all of your friends?
yeah, pretty much. It was the time of like PlayStation 1 and Sega. So everybody was like,
Nice.
huge into gaming, obviously, but not everybody was like, proficient with computers. And there was no internet, right? So you can't just Google stuff. Like you have to break stuff to learn stuff. So my parents were happy because I was racking up the computer bills because I knew how to break it. I had no idea how to fix it, obviously. So yeah, and then that got the attention of my teachers because like I was, they were doing like the computers class at some point. I was like seventh grade elementary school or something, and they were doing like computer science class, and there I was like, typing away the keyboard, doing stuff, and they're like, well, you can do this. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, how about you code, and then we take you to this state competition or whatever they called it. And I was like, sure, let me do that. Well, how old was I when I was seventh grade? Like very small. So yeah, I mean that's tiny.
Okay. So that kind of led you down a path of like computers. How did you stumble upon UI design, PHP, coding, all that?
Well, I figured I could make money on the internet, which was awesome, right? Because I could like sit at home where I usually am and do stuff on my own terms, but also make money. And then I figured I can make like a lot more than I would make working at a gas station, let's say. So I was like, that's cool. And I was browsing stuff, and I had a business idea where I was like, it was basically like I wanted to build software for like cold calling, but like cold emailing. It was a list. It would automatically email clients. You could define templates. It was fun. And I had a buddy, or I still have a buddy, and I asked him about it. I'm like, would you want to build this? And then we can, I can market it. I can think about it, maybe sell it, share the
Sure.
profits. He was like, yeah, no, like I don't have time for you. And then, he was just big into coding even back then. So I was like, okay, what if I was to build it? Because like I'm familiar with code. Like I'm not familiar with HTML and CSS necessarily, but I'm familiar with code in general, so I can get into it. And he immediately went like, you need to spend like years reading books before you can even get started. And I was like, all right, watch this. So I went like inside for like 3 months. I didn't leave the house. I was just like, coding and sleeping, and I made the thing. So that was like my first big project. I sold one copy of it because like I over engineered it, and the code was trash, but it was working, so like nobody
Sure.
cared. So I sold like one copy of it.
That's
But
pretty
yeah,
cool though.
it is definitely. And like people kept telling me like while I was doing that, they're like, if you don't sell any, like you're gonna crash, you're gonna be so disappointed. I'm like, no, like I learned like so much over these like 3 months. So
Yeah, I think it's the crazy thing about like code or design. It's like even if you spend a ton of time in something that doesn't end up making you rich, like you still gain all of the skills and knowledge that go into that. It's not like you were just, swinging a hammer on concrete for 3 months. It was like, no, you're actually like learning how to piece all these things together, and then next time you do it, you're better at it.
yeah, that's true. Like everything you do like doesn't necessarily have to make you a millionaire, but like as long as you pick stuff that's interesting to you, that's compelling, that's challenging, you're gonna keep getting better and better. Whereas opposed to like, you keep doing the exact same thing over and over again, Like you're gonna get good at that one thing, but that doesn't expand your knowledge. That doesn't, make it deeper. It just like you're an expert at this one thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just not like necessarily my approach to it. I like knowing stuff rather than not knowing stuff. So
Yeah. If there's, say, like a seventh grader listening, or maybe someone who's in high school listening right now, and they're thinking like, man, I would like to get involved in code or design. What would your advice be for them?
don't listen to anybody.
Don't listen to anyone.
Yeah, that's the most important, I believe, because as I was growing up, everybody was like, you're gonna break your back, you're gonna, your eyes are gonna get destroyed by staring at that computer all day. There's no point to it. Like you're destroying computers, you're buying computers. What are you doing? Every money, every cent you make, you put it back in. I have friends that code, but they're not all of them. They're not in the same field that I am. So it's super difficult. When I do something super impressive, I have nobody to share it with. Like it takes me like good 20-30 minutes to explain like why is it impressive. And like imagine doing that as a kid, and you're like, hey mom, I got this great idea, I'm writing this code, and she's like, yeah, sure, like whatever. So there's not going to be like any support, but if you just persist through it, it's worth it, I think.
Someone who is interested in design, maybe they have encouragement or they don't have encouragement. How do you think they would go about learning some of these things? Is it just kind of like go on the internet, try to have a business idea that you have and you try to build that? How would you suggest someone, get their feet wet in product design?
I think the best approach is to just grab something that already exists that's super complicated, like Facebook or Google or Instagram, and try to build it. Because they have all the ifs solved for you. So you don't like, let's say you're building a chat, right? And you take WhatsApp or Messenger, for example, and you're like, wait, okay, so what happens if I get 6 messages in a row? Do they go left? Do they go right? Do I get a bubble? All this is solved for you. So all you have to do is replicate it, and replicating it in the same fashion is hard. It's like not easy to make Messenger as an app or a web app. It's just not easy. So if you take something that already exists, you don't have to think about, oh, should I put like a box shadow on this button right now? You don't waste any time on that, but you just dive straight into code. That's great. But there's also like Udemy has some great courses. If you're into that, if you like, watching somebody do something and then repeating it and trying something different and maybe trying to break it to make it better, that's also a very good. But I just prefer building stuff and building something huge. It's hard. It takes a long time, but at the end of it, like you learn a lot.
I think, yeah, copying other people's work for the sake of practice is one of the best things you can do. It's not that you're going to, again, you're not going to make a business out of it, but you're going to learn those foundational skills that you can apply to other projects or future clients. And it's so valuable.
But at the end of it, you also have something to show. So like after doing this for 3, 6, 12 months, you're like, I'm awesome at this. I'm the best developer alive. And then you're like, let me get a job, let me start as a junior somewhere. Let me grab an internship. But if you don't do that, if you just spend a year watching courses, it's just hard for you to demonstrate. Like you can demonstrate your passion, sure, but like not exactly like, hey, I can actually do stuff. Whereas like here,
true,
you walk into like a company and you're like, I built Facebook, and they're like, you what? Like, say it again. So, you immediately get their attention at least, which is great. And then like you just improve your chances, is what it is.
Yeah, that's really good. Because like I think there's a place for learning, like kind of classroom learning or watching someone do something. But the way I think of it is like step one is, get some understanding of like what even it is, what are the concepts of what you're learning. And you can keep going down that path. It's like you can keep reading a book about how to ride a bike, but eventually you have to try to ride the bike. Otherwise, you could read 1,000 books on riding a bike, but at some point that knowledge doesn't help you until you actually try it and actually put your feet on the pedals. And I think it's the same thing with design and code.
You're right. It is a good starting point to start with like the documentation or, the history or something like that's, tangible, but it's very, very light. Like you're not expected to immediately remember it all. You're just reading because it's interesting, right? Okay. So Facebook made React. That's interesting to me. Like, why would
Yeah.
they do this? So I read about it, and then I understand, like, oh, so they had these problems and they wanted to solve them, and this is what React does. Okay, great. Now I know what React does. Take it slow, and yeah, eventually you'll just, have a lot of theoretical knowledge, which is great, but then also have something to show for it, which is always good. Like, it's such a world that it's very hard to take people for their word. Somebody walks up to you and they're like, I'm the best, and you're like, great, buddy, and then you just move on with your day. Whereas, like, somebody walks up to you and they have something to show. They can explain, like, I made this choice because of that. That's definitely a huge bonus if you're trying to find work or a job or whatever it may be.
So going back to what we were talking about before is, you've kind of been with UX Cabin from the beginning, and for you, from your perspective, what has it been like seeing the team grow, getting more clients, getting bigger clients? How has that been for you over the last few years?
But it was awesome. It was awesome for me because I when you work solo on a project, a lot of the stuff that you do doesn't really matter because it's just you, and then, like, whatever decision you make doesn't really impact anybody. So keeping that in mind, I did make some decisions that are, like, thinking forward, like, there's gonna be other people working on this, which also, like, backfired recently. So I had to, like, revisit those decisions, a few more years of knowledge. But yeah, it's been great. It's been great. Our approach to it, again, I think is interesting because we're going into it thinking we're not perfect. Like, we know not that much about running a dev team, right? And then, the team members that we have are also like, please tell us if we're doing something wrong. And, the communication right there is great. And, like, the whole attitude about it is great. So I think it's awesome. I think the way we pick projects as well is awesome because, we don't just take into consideration, like, oh, is it quick and how much do we earn? Like, sure, that's a factor, but is it fun? Do we want to do it? Can we do it? Stuff like that is also important, I think. So yeah, I think it's been a wild ride for sure, but it's been fun. I can't complain.
Absolutely. Obviously, your technical skills have grown a ton. How do you feel your people skills or your management skills have grown as the team has gotten bigger and you've kind of been more in an oversight or a leadership or management role for some of the younger devs?
Yeah, I can see the challenges, which is awesome. But yeah, I think I'm way more patient than I would expect myself to be. Because I'm a snappy person. Like, if I can spend 6 hours explaining something to somebody or 3 hours doing it, I'll just rather spend 3 hours just doing it myself. But there comes a certain point where you have to learn to, like, trust people to do something. That's very hard because you're like, if I can do it better, I can do it faster. But it doesn't matter. It's like you free up your time to do something else that's also important, and then you help them learn from their mistakes and get better, and then eventually you don't need to oversee what they do. Like, eventually they'll just grow and understand how we do things and just jump in and do it without you having to, like, be like, hey, that's a bad idea. So it's
Right.
challenging for sure, but it's interesting. It's an interesting take on, like, I'm the guy writing code, but also, like, I'm kind of overseeing the people that write code. Like, so am I, like, overseeing myself? Do I do these things? Like, it's an interesting perspective for sure.
Nice. When you're working with a teammate, whether it's like people from a client team or even people on the internal team, how do you judge who is a good person to work with that makes things like enjoyable to work with and makes the project go smoothly?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's kind of, I guess, the golden question when picking people you want to work with. But there's a few things we as a company, and then me as well, value, which is, like, one, it has to be communication. They need to talk to me. Like, I don't mind somebody poking me every 5 seconds with an issue, but I do mind somebody waiting, the last second and be like, hey, this isn't gonna be ready on time. And I'm like, yo, like, that's bad. So
Right.
communication is huge, but then also motivation. Like, why are you here? Obviously, everybody's here to make money because food isn't free and bills aren't free, which I understand, right? But are you ready to learn? Do you want to be part of this, or are you just here for the paycheck? Both of which are fine, but it really helps, like, not even picking a teammate, but understanding, like, why are you picking that guy? Like, oh, this guy just wants a paycheck. he wants to sit here like 4 hours a day. He wants to get paid X. Sure. And then, you give him work in accordance to that. But yeah, understanding the motivation, like, do you want to be part of the team in terms of like, do you want to work on an internal project and just do your job? Or do you want to know, like, why does that project exist? It's just a huge difference for me, but it's
Yeah.
also like, just trying to figure out a person, I guess. But yeah, those two would be the most important for me, I think.
Nice. So if you were given the choice to have someone who's like a rock star designer or developer, but they're kind of a jerk, or someone who's like really, really new but has a good attitude, who would you rather take?
Take the new guy every time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
you can't you can't learn not to be a jerk, right? But then you can just learn to code or to design or something, But yeah, I
Yeah.
would much rather watch them grow professionally, and then as long as like they're a nice person or a normal person, whatever that might mean.
Right. Yeah, I think when hiring for like design or development, it's a concept of you can train skills, like you're saying, you can get someone where they need to be in 3, 6 months, 9 months, whatever the case is. But if someone's a jerk, you don't really have a timetable on when they're not going to be a jerk anymore. You can't
Yeah.
you can't look at someone and be like, I can take the jerkiness out of this person in 3, 6, 9 months. It's like
Yeah.
they're probably like that.
That's true. That's true. There's room for that as well, I think. Sometimes you need a jerk, but for the most part, like, if we're
True.
talking about a team that's like close to home or whatever you want to call it, then I would definitely take not the jerk ones.
Right. What's one of or a few of your favorite things about working at UX Cabin?
Nobody asks me stuff. That has to be my favorite, dude. When we
Nobody
start,
asks you stuff.
yeah. So when we started, there was like, we were doing stuff on like a weekly-ish basis where you would like, hey, there's this stuff to do, and I'm like, sure, let me do it, and then I tell you like, hey, I did this. I couldn't make this in time, but I'll do it tomorrow. And every time I say something, you're like, sure. I'm like, that's weird. Like, he doesn't poke me like 11 times a day to see like, am I doing okay? Or, like, which is like the most passive aggressive way of asking somebody, are you done? So, and that was, I think, the best at the beginning. It was like all the freedoms that you get, we, for the first 6 months of working together, we had 0 calls. At some point we figured out like, sometimes it makes sense to hop on a call, but we were just like, you tell me what to do in a very clear and concise fashion, and then I understand it, and then I do it, and then you're happy. Like, it was that simple, and it was that simple lifestyle that was awesome. There was nothing complicated about the job. There was no like time commitments in terms of like, I have to wake up or I have to go to sleep or I can't be on the other side of the globe. Nothing mattered except for the work, which was awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that helped us grow so much over the pandemic was kind of that mindset of, you don't have to be to work at a certain time. You don't have to, have specific working hours. You really just need to be able to get the work done within the given time frame. If that's really late at night, if it's really early in the morning, that's fine. Your work will speak for itself.
Yeah, but also you're the one who chooses the time frame, right? So when you approach me with something to work, you're like, how long do you need? And I say 3 weeks. So if there's like, doesn't matter what happens, but I chose that. Like, I think that it can be done in 3 weeks, so I do it in 3 weeks. Do I work for 3 days and then chill the rest of the time? Doesn't matter, right? Or do I just just do the work across 3 weeks? Like, it shouldn't matter, and I never thought it mattered, but like, we're pretty much the only company that thinks that. Everybody else is like, well, what do you mean you don't feel like working today? I don't. Like, I'm not a machine. I just woke up. I'm not like in the mood. I don't want to work today, so I'm gonna go outside. I'm gonna go for a walk, grab a meal, go back to sleep, and wake up tomorrow and do more work.
It's kind of like when a client is like, they ask like, how long will this take? And you give them an answer of, say 3 weeks. And you can tell that they're kind of uncomfortable with that. They might be up against a wall on something, and they, in kind of a subtle way, ask, can you change that or do it faster. And it's kind of like that scenario of like, I can say yes and then give you the bad news later, or I can just give you the bad news now and say it's actually going to take 3 weeks to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the situations where you're happy you can just say no. It's like, if we say 3 weeks and then you think it can be done faster, go ahead and do it faster. Like, we don't mind, you know?
Or it's like, what do you want to take out of this so that we could, what's the core piece of this that we can extract,
Yeah.
and just do that within 2 weeks or 1 week.
Yeah, certainly. If we can change the specs like that, that would be great. Like, if they're like, can you do it faster? And it's like, well, sure, but like, can the spec be smaller? You know what I mean? Like, let's not make it fancy then, but let's make it work and then make it fancy later. Like, that type of stuff is cool. But yeah, when it's like, the time pressure is, I think, the worst. When you're working there and thinking like, I have 60 minutes. Like, that doesn't help anybody. Especially if that time pressure was, projected on you. It's not something you chose. That's very bad, I think. Amount of stress for you.
I know I have some friends at different companies where they're kind of given their estimate from management, and they're like, I don't think this can be done actually in this time frame. And management's like, no, I think it can be done. And you're like, well, I'm the one doing it. I don't think I can do it in that time. And then lo and behold, they're not able to get it done in that time frame, and then they get in trouble for not getting it done within that time frame that was arbitrarily given to them. It's like,
nobody wins there, right?
Nobody wins, yeah.
Like, everybody, your clients,
and then they have to have meetings about why did you miss the deadline, and what do we need an action plan for you and all this stuff.
Yeah. But nobody, like, that's so bad. Like, nobody, the client's mad, the managers are mad, the devs are mad. Like, at the end of the day, if you can keep the people working for you happy, that's good for you. I mean, like, I'm no expert, but I mean, that sounds like reasonable to me, right?
Yeah, one thing I've kind of thrown around a few times is I think that most business problems are actually people problems. So if you take care of the people, they'll take care of your business.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that one. I think it's very true, like, because, we have such a friendly relationship, and, I don't have to, if I'm on vacation, I don't have to respond. I can just turn off Slack and, like, ignore it, but I also don't mind. Because to me, it feels like a buddy's asking me, like, hey, could you help me with this real quick? And I'm like, sure, why not? You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
So and that's not to say, like, if you're friendly with people, they'll work more. That's a bad approach. Like, but it's just I don't know. It just feels friendly instead of like, you don't feel like you have to do anything, and then every time something happens, you can choose if you want to do it or not, which is great. And then like everything you make, it's basically everything you do is a choice, which feels good. Like it feels like
like
you're
feeling
free.
like you have autonomy or like self-control over what you do in your day.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, the feeling like everything you do in a day or everything you don't do in a day is exactly what you want it to do. So that's I think great.
Yeah, it's that nice freedom aspect of, you're accountable for what you do. So, do what you think is the best amount of work or the right tasks to do in order to, achieve success for this project, for this client, for your day, basically.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting, as people come onto the team, whether they're like junior, brand new, senior, mid-level, I think you can kind of tell if someone is going to be really good within like the first week of working with them. And it's just like little things. I don't even know you can put your finger on it. It's like, just like showing up to meetings on time, or sending a precursor Slack of if something feels off or wrong, or just like general preparedness, even asking the right questions. Hey, I don't know how to do this. I've tried this, and this, and I can't figure it out, versus like, how do you do this thing? It's like you can almost tell within like a really, really short period of time if someone's going to be a good teammate or not.
Yeah, it's the correct question and the unexpected updates for me as well. Like it's like Stack Overflow. Like nobody's gonna help you on the site unless you show them what you already tried. So you're like, I have this problem, and they're gonna be like, bye, sure. Well, I have all these problems. Like, but if you're like, I have this problem, and these are the approaches that I took, and they failed for this reason, then they're gonna be super interested, and then they'll be more than willing to help you out. I think it's the same here. It's like if you just ask me, hey, I can't figure this out, like that's can you not though? Like, what if I give you 1,000 years? Can you figure it out then? Like, so obviously you can, but like, what is the problem? And then the unexpected update for me is the one that's usually an early tell of like, you expect something to be done in a week, but somebody's like, in a few days, they're like, hey, I made this progress and this is what I did. This is the decision I made. What do you think? Or just, you don't even have to ask for feedback. You're just like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that this is what I did. And then you're like, whoa, like I just got an update that I didn't ask for, and it's like very nice and concise and well presented. Like, so
Yeah,
yeah, it's the
kind of that
small things for
proactive
sure.
approach.
Yeah, that's why I keep telling.
Totally.
When people ask me what I do, I'm like, like why are we special in terms of like, why are we better than others or whatever they ask. I'm like, anybody can build a website, right? Like it doesn't take a lot of skill or a lot of experience to build a website, but the details are what sets us apart from others. We consider the smallest things, but there's just a lot of them. In an average website, there's like 1,000 small details that the typical people like don't notice. Like even the users don't care for, the designers don't care for. But when you just use the site, it feels wrong. It feels like something's off. It feels like something's missing. Like it's a little weird. Whereas like if you just get the details right, like the timing of an animation is such a tiny detail and nobody cares for it. But if you get it right, they'll just set you miles apart from everybody else. So yeah,
Or even thinking like future proofing it of like, what if you want to add on to this in a year? Or what if there's going to be, 10,000 people using this? Or what if you want to extend it in this way? Like a lot of those decisions are like design and software architecture decisions that you kind of need to know up front, or at least be prepared for, in order to make a good application for the long term.
yeah, there's there's a lot of decisions to be made there, and at the end of the day, if you grab the best dev and the worst dev in the world, you're going to get the same site. It's going to be exactly the same. One of them is going to stop working tomorrow and the other one isn't. That's the key difference. Is like you're paying for having less to worry about. So
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like it's basically mitigating the risk.
Paying one time at the beginning versus paying 3 times over and over and over.
Yeah, a buddy of mine asked me to quote him for a website like a few years ago. He does aquariums and tropical fish and whatnot. And I quoted him, what I thought was a friendly price and he thought was outrageous. And so I was like, and then he kept saying like, I can find people to do it for X. And I was like, well, do it. Like, I don't like, I'm fine. Like, it's okay. Like, go. So he does. And then, I don't know, like a few days later, once it's done, like, it took the dude like 2 weeks to finish it. And then like a few days later, he calls me and he's like, yo, this doesn't work. I have this problem. And the guy's not answering my phone. And I'm like, but there's nothing, like, I can't help you. Like, even if I want to, I can't. Like, because I don't know who built it. Like, it would take me another 2 weeks to figure out, like, what that is. So,
right.
Yeah, I guess that
Totally.
is the choice you make.
There's always someone out there who can do it for cheaper. But if you're looking at a website as just a cost rather than an investment, you're going to be hurting by the end of it.
Yeah, badly.
Where do you see UX Cabin going in the next few years?
I think we start, I guess, cranking out more products that are ours. Because we're doing like a lot of client work, which is cool. That's like the most exciting when we spend like a few months working on something and just pouring our soul into it and just, just pushing it out. It doesn't have to be accepted or successful, just having it available and be like, yo, I built this. Like, that's what we did. So that's awesome. So yeah, definitely would like to see more of our own stuff. in the future. And who knows, like maybe some of it catches on, it's very successful and everybody's happy and people want to use it and they have all these feedback, and then we implement
Sure.
stuff and break stuff and do what we do, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think there's that tough balance of like client work is paying you now to do it and it's like an immediate reward. But building your own product is like there's so much that goes into it and it's hard, it's long, and sometimes it doesn't pay off. But there's that chance that it's much more lucrative or it pays off or it makes a much more bigger impact than, just selling your time for client work.
Yeah. I think we're doing well though. Like we're still managing to have some fun with internal projects as well as have some fun with client work. So I think it's a good balance. It's just the year's been crazy, not to blame everything on COVID, but there's been a lot that's been going on. So, we were a little busy is what it is.
Nice. So you live in Serbia, which is far away from where I live, and I've actually never been there. What's your favorite thing about where you live, and what are some of the things that are kind of unique to Serbia?
Everybody's nice. People find that like anybody that comes here to visit, they're like, hey, why is everybody nice to me? Like, what's going on? But it's like, yeah, people are generally like nice, and then the country is like the exact right size to still have access to actual healthy food and good food choices, which is great. And then it has like stuff to offer. Like there's places to see here. There's history to be heard, which is also awesome for people that care for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of the food. The food here is awesome. The people are generally speaking nice. Like there's nobody's gonna yell at you here for the most part. Like, and then there's the convenience of it, which is awesome. Where it's like there's groceries that are open 24/7, or like every day, like for New Year's Eve, for Christmas. So like that's very convenient to like, and they're all over town. So like it's very convenient to have.
Especially when you're working Eastern hours in Serbia.
I haven't woken up before 2 p.m. in my life, I think. Like since I finished school.
That's hilarious. I think, kind of like what we were saying, we don't necessarily have like strict hours of you have to work here and when, but it kind of works out because your overlap, or when you actually like feel like you want to get up and do work, is actually when we in Eastern are actually getting up with our morning and starting to do work.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, you do it for work. I was like, no, this is how I actually live. Like, I don't like waking up early. I like waking up late, and it just ended up working out, which is great. But like, I prefer waking up at like 2 or 3 p.m.
What's your favorite place to eat or meal?
Definitely would be a steak. I'm a huge fan of steaks. There's a local
We almost created at one point a steak channel in our Slack.
Yeah.
But I think it was just ended up being you and me, so we just send each other pictures of steak.
Yeah, which reminds me, I owe you a couple from a few days ago, so I'll definitely get there. But yeah, I like steaks, but then like it's all this like, all the food is fancy now with like gold leaf and whatnot. It's like I like, steak and potatoes is great. Like we don't have to make it any more complicated than that. So
what's your favorite cut?
It's definitely ribeye. Dry
Ribeye.
is like 30 to 60 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, how about you?
I'm a sucker for a good fillet, but the marbling of a ribeye or a strip is sometimes really nice too if you want a little bit more of that flavor and a little bit more meat on your plate. But if it's steak and it's cooked well, it's hard to go wrong.
When you say well, I think you mean medium rare is what it is.
When I say cooked well, I mean medium or below.
Yeah. No, I think ribeye is like well balanced. Like it's like steak like Wagyu or some we have in, I don't know if it's available in America, but in Europe there's like this thing called Angus beef, which is a specific type of beef that tastes a little bit I don't know, it has a very specific like almost like wild taste. So it's like not like for everybody, but whereas like you know, you can just be like, if somebody never tried steak, you can be like, grab a ribeye, like it's just a piece of meat that's like well balanced and rounded up. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Why don't you tell us a little bit of like what you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, sure. As somebody who's like connected all day, I kind of like being disconnected when I'm like I just go offline from time to time. So pre-COVID, that meant, you know, going out with friends to like sitting next to a river and just chilling, doing nothing, you know, listening to some music, having like no internet access if possible. That would be like great. But yeah, just the small stuff like that, doing the outdoorsy stuff, like playing basketball, riding a motorcycle. You know, I'm not like a huge fan of travel unless it's like completely unrestricted, because it like for me it's like so much planning. Like, okay, I need to bring this gear in this fashion, and then, you know, I need a decent connection, not because like I'm working, but because I might have to do something. And if that is the case, like if there's a like even if I'm on vacation, if there's like a production that blows up somewhere, I'm going to tend to it. So it really
Sure.
helps if I have an internet connection.
If you could meet anyone, dead or alive, in the world, who would it be?
If I could meet anybody just for like a chat, or
Yeah, a hangout.
I think Elon's a fun person to hang out with. But then I haven't met you, so I would meet you and grab a steak for sure. Because that's awesome. That's awesome to do. Like this whole like we have all these tools, like all these cameras and microphones and whatever, but like chilling in person is always way much better. So but yeah, I think
Totally.
if we're talking like celebrities, I think Elon's a fun person to chat, just because like he has the breadth of knowledge, which is interesting, I guess. I don't know. Maybe he's like boring and he's like doesn't want to talk about anything else except rockets. I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah, I don't know.
I
Maybe
don't
he's a
know.
jerk.
He could be like if I was him, I would definitely be a jerk. Like I get spammed by everybody. Imagine that. So yeah,
What's something you wish you were good at that you're not?
piano.
Really?
Yes, I always wanted to like I. So when it comes to art, right? Like, you know, drawing, painting, any form of art, singing, playing any instrument, I suck. Like I'm bad. And then I always wanted to know how to play the piano. I don't know why. To me, the idea of playing the piano is cool. I have no idea why.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, you could learn now, right? What's to stop you?
I have this plan in the future of grabbing a piano and some lessons.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely one of the things. Like there's so many times in my life where we walk into like a cafe or something, there's a piano. I'm like, oh, I wish I could play it right now. Like they would probably chase me out, but I wish I could.
Kind of rounding out this interview, what's one piece of advice that you've come and learned that is just extremely helpful in your life or career that's stuck with you for your life?
There's two, and I don't know how to pick one.
You can do two. That's even better.
Yes. It was a completely random situation, but a friend told me I was asking a question where I wasn't like I was doing a sanity check because I wasn't sure if I was right, and I wanted to get a second opinion, and they're like, "Why are you doubting yourself? Like, don't doubt yourself." And I was like, "That's a very like obviously I'm right. Like I put time into this. Like to an extent, you really never should doubt yourself because if you put in the effort." And if you believe in that, if you try hard, then it should be correct. So I would just definitely never doubt myself. And did the second one, which like I wish I knew when I was like 12, is learn how to say no. It's so hard when you have this client and he's ready to pay you so much money and you're a kid, and they ask you like, can you do Python? And obviously you've never seen Python, but you're like, yes. And then you break your back trying to learn Python, and then your output is garbage because you're new to it, and it can't be good. So I was under the impression that if I ever said no, I would lose a client, but it was actually the other way around. So if I knew how to say no at the right times in my life, I would still be here, but I wouldn't have this.
Those are some life-shaping advice criteria there. Thank you so much for being on with us, and I know you have a ton of value that I've received from working with you, and insight and wisdom. So I certainly hope that people listening to this will get a little piece of that in this small interview. So Fisher, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, I've definitely, thanks for everything. I've learned so much as well. Like I was decent at coding, and now like I'm a decent human being, which is I think good as well.
Aw, that's awesome. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on the Product Design Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure and go follow our guests. Let them know they did a great job and you learned a lot. More to come in the following weeks as we bring on new guests. Please hit that subscribe button so that you will get these podcasts and learn a ton about the product design community. Excited to see you next time. Thanks.